Hello everyone, and welcome to our second part of From Setup to Success, the essential tactics for software asset management. My name is Sean Walker and I'm a principal product success architect and part of the Ranger team here at ServiceNow. And today I'm going to be talking to you about the success portal and the SAM maturity, but more specifically the crawl phase of the SAM maturity. So as always, here's our safe harbor notice, just letting you know that any forward-looking statements are really going to be based on our beliefs and assumptions at the time of this video. So many customers have purchased SAM and haven't yet installed it, or have installed it but haven't begun to use it. Some of these customers are really unsure on where to begin in their SAM journey. So the SAM maturity assessment is going to provide that all-in-one adoption accelerator for them to use and really start them on their journey. It provides a predefined roadmap and gives the customers kind of details on where they should start. The maturity items are kind of like a checklist for achieving those success goals. So the maturity roadmap is broken down into three separate phases. We've got the crawl phase, the walk phase, and the run phase. So today I'm going to be covering the crawl phase and talking about each of the maturity items in this phase in more detail. So the crawl phase, this is where you're going to begin your SAM journey. It's where to start developing your new SAM program. So at this stage, you're going to be working on establishing that healthy CMDB or configuration management database. You're going to identify the tools that are used in your environment that capture and discover all of the software data for your organization. You're going to look at really wanting to establish those processes and roles within your organization and for your SAM team. And you're probably going to want to start focusing on your end user compute or your SAS integrations because those licensing models are a lot less complex and you can really get some quick realization of value if you focus on end user compute and SAS first rather than getting into those big complex publishers. So this phase is really about getting your instance ready to start using SAM. But if you're a more mature customer, then a lot of these features within our maturity items might already be completed in your instance, but it's still a really good idea for you to go through each one of them and make sure you haven't missed anything and identify any potential gaps. So this is a diagram that comes from the ISO standard for IT asset management. And what it talks about is it's the capability blueprint, and it's what you need to establish within your ITAM program to really be successful with IT asset management. It starts out with the tier 1, which is the trustworthy data, and that's really about knowing what you have so you can manage it. If you don't know what you have, you don't have that visibility, you don't have that trust in your data, you really can't manage it. From there, you can move into tier 2, which is that practical management, where you can improve those management controls and then start driving the benefit from those controls. Tier 3 is about your operational integrations, and that's really about improving the efficiency and effectiveness through things like integrations with other areas like requests or procurement or maybe your ITSM help desk system. And then tier 4 is strategic conformance, where you really achieve best in class. So one thing that's really important to know about this capability blueprint is you don't have to become best in class at everything if it's not something important to your organization. What you really want to be able to focus on is becoming best in class for those aspects of IT asset management that really impact and are important to your specific organization. So keep that in mind. So it's definitely possible to progress through the capabilities and become best in class in one specific aspect of IT asset management. But what really is important is really that tier 1 and trustworthy data. And so that's what the crawl phase is about. It's about establishing that tier 1 trustworthy data within your instance so you can start building the rest of your ITAM program. So the first maturity item I'm going to be talking about is the process, and that's identifying the stakeholders within your organization. You're going to want to identify the different areas of your organization that are impacted by a SAM program. And once you've identified those areas, you're going to want to identify those stakeholders within the departments and really make sure that they're supportive of implementing a SAM program. So establishing that relationship with your stakeholders is really key to the success of establishing a SAM program. You're also going to want to be sure you set up that clear communication plan with those stakeholders going forward so they're kept up to date on what you're doing and your progress throughout the implementation. One of the things I wanted to show you, and this is the first in our video that you're going to see like this is the software asset management process guide. Now this guide has a ton of really good information for you, especially if you're new to software asset management, and it's got a lot of predefined processes that you can consider setting up within your organization. It's also got a lot of typical things about role or standard roles and responsibilities within this document. So I highly recommend if you don't have this document, you can pause this video, take a capture of that QR code and go to that software asset management process guide, and that can be found on the Now Create site, which is part of Now Learning. So you're going to want to log into Now Learning and then go to Now Create, and you should be able to find the software asset management process guide there. So who are some of those typical stakeholders we're talking about? Where do we start? So I'm going to go through some of the typical stakeholders you might not think about or you may think about within your organization. So the first thing you're going to want to identify is procurement team, right? They're the ones who really ensure that the organization is acquiring the software legally and cost effectively. So they're definitely a stakeholder within a successful ITAM program. And you're, again, really going to want to set up that relationship with the stakeholders in procurement so that they can continually feed you information as they procure new software for the organization. We've also got the IT managers and administrators, and those are the people really responsible for deploying and configuring and managing the software across your organization. They're going to be the ones managing the infrastructure systems. They're going to be the ones managing the software deployment tools, etc. So you really want to identify those key stakeholders within that department and develop a relationship with them as well. You've also got finance and accounting, right? They're the ones who monitor that budget and really ensure compliance with the licensing agreement. They're the ones who have the keys to the castle. They have the money. You need to have that good relationship with them, and so they understand what you're doing and what you're trying to do and how what you're doing can benefit them, right? If they're doing all the budgeting and the allocations across the organization, it could be very important for them to know where the software is and who's using it so they can allocate the costs appropriately to them. You've also got legal and compliance, right? They're really responsible for making sure that the organization is adhering to the terms of those software licensing contracts that have been signed, and they're really going to be really concerned with compliance, because they're likely going to be the ones who get the letters when you're going to get audited by a software company. And then, of course, we've got our end users, right? They're the ones who are going to be using the software on a day-to-day basis, and they're the ones who are going to be requesting the most software. So they're really critical to have some and keep them in mind as you're developing your SAM program, because, again, it's about keeping them happy, about efficiently meeting their needs, etc., but still at the same time managing and optimizing the software within your environment. We've also got enterprise architecture, right? They're the ones who are going to be responsible for making sure that the software that's being purchased and deployed is in alignment with where they want that to go within the organization. They're going to make sure that they minimize that application redundancy. They're going to set up standards, and they're going to rationalize all the software within the environment and make sure it works within your existing environment. Security operations also has a really big stake in SAM. They're the ones who are responsible for, identifying those vulnerabilities and threats and risks associated with the software. So oftentimes there's a very tight relationship between security operations and SAM, because you have those, those different tasks coming from them to maybe remove software because it's a security risk, etc. Of course, we've also got our C-suite executives. They're the ones really responsible for that strategic decision making, and they're the ones who are going to say whether or not software is purchased for the environment on those big purchases, right? So it's really important that you also have that C-suite sponsorship, knowing that they have a SAM program that's really responsible for maintaining and managing the software within their organization, and you're going to want to have a very close relationship with them so you understand the objectives of the C-suite and you're making sure you're meeting those objectives as part of your SAM program. And you've also got the GRC and audit team, right? They're the ones who are going to be internally verifying the compliance of your software and identifying any discrepancies or corrective actions. So that'd be for internal auditing purposes. The next maturity item, it talks about training, and that's obviously very important, especially if you're a new organization to SAM and you don't have a SAM program. You're going to want to make sure that you're documenting and creating training material for everyone, not for just necessarily for your SAM resources, but also for the end users. As you start to implement policies and process, right, you're going to want to have those clearly documented for the end users to follow so that they know what they're doing, as well as your SAM resources know how to do these processes as well. So there's several different training options available. Obviously, when it comes to the tool itself and ServiceNow software asset management, there is the SAM fundamentals course that's available on Now Learning. So this is a paid course, so you might have some training credits, etc. So talk to your account reps on the training and seeing if you can get some training for your key SAM resources on how to use and manage the platform. Another great resource which I'll promote is the Ask a Rangers Software Asset Management YouTube series we've created. This video will be posted there, as well as many other videos that my fellow Rangers and I are creating videos on a lot of the different features and functionality within SAM and how to use those effectively within your organization. So again, pause the video, go to that playlist, add it to your favorites, as we're going to keep adding videos to this particular playlist that are help you implement certain features of SAM. And if you're brand new to software asset management or IT asset management in general, it's always good to look at the courses provided by ITAM, or the International Association of IT Asset Managers, and they're kind of the main training organization for IT asset management. They have several different certifications, which many of us who are practitioners or have been practitioners have taken the courses there, and it helps you answer the why we do asset management. Why are we doing this within our environment, and what benefit does it provide, etc. It's not necessarily the how, but it's the why, and it's great training for all asset managers to take and get that foundational asset management knowledge. The next maturity item would be another process, which is really defining those success criterias, and really what are we trying to achieve here? What is a successful implementation of a SAM program for you as an organization? It's going to vary based on each organization's needs. So you're going to really want to document those success criteria And you're going to want to identify some metrics which you can use to measure them. And then of course you're going to want to communicate that with those stakeholders we identified earlier to make sure that your objectives that you're setting and your success criteria that you're setting meet with the expectations of the stakeholders as well. So one of the good things you could use is the Software Asset Management Customer Success Center, and there's some really good documentation on this site for you. There's a Software Asset Management Foundation Success Pack, which gives you a lot of resources. It gives you a lot of things to think about and start you on your SAM journey, and a lot of things that are going to help you be successful. One of the things is like that implementation readiness checklist for SAM. It's going to give you a lot of really good information on where to start, things to think about, maybe some objectives if you don't know what they are. The next maturity item is going to be setting those success goals. So now you've gone through and you've defined, what those success criteria are, what we're trying to do with our SAM program. So let's get them into the Software Asset Management Success Portal by creating success goals. Oftentimes it's really hard for software asset managers or any IT asset managers to really show the value because a lot of times it's not cost savings per se, but it's more cost avoidance, and it's really hard to quantify cost avoidance unless you're properly tracking it. So having success goals within the tool really help you identify those short-term, long-term goals, and helps you keep a record of what you've achieved as a SAM department and as part of your SAM program. And it actually has things like potential savings and actual savings, which do roll up to what's called the Asset Executive Dashboard and can show the C-suite or other people within the organization how much money you've actually achieved or how much savings you've actually or costs you've actually avoided for the organization, so your work doesn't go unnoticed and they don't not see the value that you provide to the organization. So as part of that success pack and implementation checklist, if you don't know where you're going, you don't know what your goals are, etc., you can use some of the things that are in those success packs to really help you refine those business outcomes, maybe some sample success metrics, etc., to get you started on your journey and getting those goals in the tool. We also do have a video on our Ask a Ranger playlist for success goals and activities that talk you through how to create those success goals and activities. Next, we're going to talk about the other process, which is a Raster Diagram. And a lot of customers don't do this. Even our mature customers don't do this. And it's a really valuable exercise for you to go through, especially as you're starting out your SAM journey. And that's really, documenting the roles and responsibilities of that SAM program. It's really important if you're starting to implement things within SAM that everybody knows that the SAM program is responsible for these specific things, like, for example, software models, right? If you're using software models within ServiceNow and you're assigning or allocating your entitlements to it, but then somebody from another department goes and makes modifications to that software model, it can inadvertently affect maybe your software catalog, maybe your compliance position, etc. So it's really important to identify the RACI matrix for the specific SAM-based activities within your organization. So again, in the process guide, which I've referred to a few times here, it gives you a sample of what the RACI matrix you can look to create for your organization. And again, in the process guide, it does have a lot of base processes you can use to add as a framework for your organization. And you can go through and identify who is responsible, accountable, consulted, or informed on the different processes that affect SAM. The next one is what we call EUC service graph connectors, or EUC, or end user compute. And what the service graph connectors are about is it's what you want to do here is you want to work with those stakeholders you've identified before, like the IT administrators or system administrators, to identify where does my data exist, or how can I get my hands on the software information within our organization. What tools are they using to capture this information? Or do we need to go ahead and implement something if it doesn't exist? The odds are it exists out there. There are so many different systems that IT staff use that capture a lot of this information for you. So you're going to want to identify the sources of that data. And then you're going to want to look and see about putting service graph connectors in to capture that information. And you're going to have to work with those IT administrators because you're going to need those credentials and information and get their help to connect into those instances. So you've got things like SCCM, Jamf, CrowdStrike, etc., which all have some level of software information or software installation information, and the service graph connectors help you bring them in, and those all go through like a multi-source engine and populate the CMDB or configuration management database with all of the software installation data. So as I mentioned, there are numerous service graph connectors out there. So the odds are your organization has many of these tools or some of these tools, and you need to identify which ones have data in them that you can leverage as part of your SAM program or even your HAM program. For end user compute, there's a lot of really good ones like SCCM, Intune, Jamf, Tanium, right? They all provide really good information about the software that's installed in your environment. And again, if you don't have any of these tools, you can look to deploy ServiceNow's Agent Client Collector. But again, work with your account team if that's the case, and your IT administrators team to understand what you're licensed for, what you have in your environment today. So again, I do encourage you to go out and take a look at these. So we've got a lot of really good resources on service graph connectors. Obviously, there are a lot of them. So the first one's actually a video we created on our Ask a Ranger playlist, and that's how to configure the service graph connector for SCCM for IT asset management. This video is about actually configuring the service graph connector for SCCM. The next thing would be a white paper that was written by one of my colleagues, Anne-Marie Duffy, on SCCM Service Graph Connector. It tells you everything you need to know about that connector. There's another link here for the ServiceNow store, which is going to give you a list of all the Service Graph connectors that are available on that store. Anne-Marie's also written a really great white paper on Tanium. So if you have Tanium in your environment and want to learn more about that, you can definitely go to that white paper as well. And again, the final link here is the link to the ServiceNow product documentation site on service graph connectors, because again, there are many, many, many of them. Okay, so now you've got your service graph connector configured. What do you do with all this data? Well, you're going to want to go through the normalization process. So EUC, end user compute normalization. And what the normalization process does is it compares the discovered publisher, product, and version against ServiceNow's content repository of software, and it helps normalize that data down into a normalized value for publisher, product, and version and edition, right? Because a lot of the data coming in from all these different sources that can be different, and depending on how things are installed, they can be different, right? So you need to have that normalized. So what does the normalization look like within your instance? So if we go here and we take a look at one of the discovery model records. Now this discovery model was created by the information coming in from, say, your SCCM Jamf or into through the service graph connector. This discovery model gets created, and what's discovered are these values over here. So you've got your discovered publisher, right? Microsoft, the product, which is Project Professional 2016. And then you've got this big, long, giant version, right? Which is 16.0.77.66. And you're going to have a whole bunch of these discovery models with a whole bunch of, say, different versions being discovered in your instance, right? One of your laptops may have had a patch, and the other one might not have had a patch for Office. So these values on discovered versions are going to be different, but I license my software based off of Microsoft Office Professional 2016, not 2016.16.0.222, right? It's at a more higher level version level. So what the normalization process does is it normalizes it down into these standard values. So normalize publisher, Microsoft product, project, version 2016, edition, professional, right? And this is knows it's a licensable product. So that's what happens as part of the normalization process. And why this is important is within the tool, right? All those entitlements that you put in the system are associated with a software model, and those software models map back to these normalized values. So normalized discovery models do play a very big factor within ServiceNow and how the additional data is used within SAM. So it's really important as you're doing a compliance position for that specific publisher, right? In this case, we're saying end user compute normalization. So I have entitlements, say, from Microsoft. I want to make sure all of my Microsoft discovered information has been normalized and has values for all those three. Okay, so the next process would be establishing a procurement, what they call a swivel process. So the odds are your organization has a procurement system. They're doing procurement somehow. Could be Ariba, could be Coupa, it could be Excel spreadsheet, right? But there's obviously somebody who is somewhere in the organization they're doing procurement. So what you want to be able to do, as I said, is you have that relationship earlier with the stakeholder, right? The main procurement person. And you want to establish a process of how are they going to be feeding you information about the hardware and software that is purchased within your organization, and giving you that very valuable information about what has been procured for your organization. And you're going to want to make sure you're capturing that and have that process documented. Another really good thing to do is to actually use the ServiceNow procurement plugin. And what this is going to do is allow you to create purchase orders within your system so that you can track the purchases that are being made. Now, again, they call it swivel chair because you may have to create a purchase order in ServiceNow, then go talk to your procurement team or put a request in Coupa. So you're going to have essentially two purchase orders for the same thing. But at least by putting the purchase order in the system, you give the ability to receive that purchase order and track all of the relevant things automatically and work to automate this later in the process. So if you want more information about the procurement module, you can go to the procurement documentation site that I have listed here. Okay, so the next process would be end user compute or SaaS software product entitlements. So now you've got that integration with your Service Graph connector. You're bringing back your software installation data. Now you've normalized those discovery models for a product. Now you want to enter those entitlements. And you need that information. You've got that process set up where procurement or contracts are feeding you that data of what they have purchased. So you're going to gather that information from those various sources, and then you're going to create those entitlements in the system. So we have quite a few really good videos on this. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on creating the entitlements because, again, we've already created these videos. So again, I've done a video on gathering and creating software entitlements. There's also another one about creating entitlements using the guided playbook experience. So if you're new to SAM, that's a really good way to get started creating your entitlements. You can also create them manually. So there's a video on that. And then there's also a way to create entitlements in bulk using the entitlement import feature, and I've done a video on that. And so, if your procurement team feeds you like 100 different purchases, well, obviously you don't want to do them one by one, so you can use the bulk to do that. And I've done a video on how you can do that. One of the things I did want to point out, though, is it's really one of those critical pieces of information you're going to want to get from your procurement team or your contract team or your vendors or your resellers, right? Is your PPN or publisher part number, because that's really going to be a great starting point for you as a new SAM manager to understand what has been purchased. Our content library has a list of a whole bunch of publisher part numbers that the major publishers publish, and it gives you a great starting point. So I know that if I've purchased PPN H305613, that's actually a purchase for Microsoft Project 2016 Professional, and I know that's an enterprise level part number, and it has specific use rights and license metrics assigned to it. So all that data is contained within that publisher part number, and it really helps you when you're creating your entitlement to have that data. Now, it's not easy to get all the time, but you should be able to get it from all of these various systems. The next is your end user compute or your SSO or SAS integrations. So one of the ways you can get some quick value with SAM as you're doing things like working with the teams to get the service graph connector up and running for whatever that discovery source is. Sometimes that can take some time. Same with this process, can take a bit of time, but you can work concurrently with these, and that's integrating with an SSO provider. So what SSO is single sign-on. So if you or your organization uses, say, Okta or Azure, you can actually do an integration from ServiceNow into that. And what that's going to do is any of your SaaS-based applications that go through the single sign-on process, creating this integration is going to give you that list of applications and list of users who are using it and give you some visibility into what's going on within your SaaS estate. So you can establish that SSO connection for a really quick win to have visibility into what we have, who's using what within your organization. So again, that is a single integration, right? To download all this information. It gives you information about how many subscriptions are assigned, etc. It shouldn't necessarily be a replacement for some of the direct SaaS integrations, but it definitely is a good start because it gives you everything all at once. But you should also, again, this isn't really a maturity item card. It's something you can think about, though, and that's the integrating with SaaS applications. Because again, these are quick wins, right? It's very hard to be out of compliance with a SaaS application, but it's very easy for organizations not to use their subscriptions effectively. No SaaS publisher is going to tell you have too many subscriptions for this software, right? They're not going to tell you you have too many. They're just going to let you keep buying and buying and buying, and they're not going to tell you when people stop using it, right? So getting the visibility into your SaaS applications is really, really helpful to be able to reclaim some of those subscriptions and reassign them to new people, so you're not repurchasing every time somebody needs it. So there are many, many SaaS integrations out there. This QR code will send you to a list of all the different SaaS applications you can see that are out there today that are already built. You will have to work with your IT administrators and whoever manages those third-party portals to get access to that. But again, it's a quick win for you. And one of the things we haven't talked about, and again, this is not really to do with maturity item cards within the SAM workspace, but that's about one of the things you're going to want to do is take a look at your foundational data. And this should really be a prerequisite for you. And what the foundational data is, and what I'm talking about, are those common tables within the instance that are shared across many of the different applications within your ServiceNow instance. So those are usually set up when you set up the platform, and they're maintained generally by other teams, but you want to make sure you know what data is in these foundational tables and really see whether it's going to be enough for your SAM implementation. So you're going to want to take a look at, say, your employee and user data in the tool. Things like I just talked about, the SAS and the SSO, those are assigned to users generally by email address. So you're going to want to make sure that each one of the users in ServiceNow has a corresponding email address, so that when the data comes in from your SSO or SAS, it's going to be able to match that subscription to that specific user. And then you can use that for many, many things like allocations, etc., to help you optimize later on. So it's really important to have that good employee data. Another good thing to have is locations, understanding what locations are in place and what cost centers and departments are in place. You're going to want to know your employees' data is also synchronized and has values here, because there's going to be times where you're going to need to produce reports, like we mentioned earlier, right? For software allocations on the finance side, right? They may want to allocate the cost based off cost center, or based off department, or based off another attribute. So you're going to want to make sure that foundational data exists. You can also have potentially there's software that is restricted by geography, right? I can only use this software in North America. I can't use it in Asia. So I have to do some restrictions. And so I need to be able to restrict those installation records by location and see who falls out of that location, etc., etc. So that's really important to have in this system. And of course, you need to make sure that the companies, manufacturers, and vendors, or companies are publishers, also known as manufacturers, the same kind of table. They're all set up in the system, because when you import those entitlements, right, you're going to want to know who the vendor maybe that sold it to you, the publisher that it belongs to, etc. So you're going to want to review through all of that data at the beginning of your SAM program and make sure it meets all of your needs going forward. Okay, and I think we're getting close to the end here, and this, I believe, is the last maturity item, and that is software requests. Something that's really good to set up initially is have that conversation and work with those stakeholders to develop the process on how you request software, right? If you think about the software asset management lifecycle, the request is the start of the lifecycle for any software, right? So you're going to want to have standard software catalog items and non-standard, right? As you work with your enterprise architecture team and have a standard list of applications that you should be allowing in your organization, and get catalog items in for there, get the entitlement information in for them, and then have a way for end users to request stuff that's not in your catalog through that non-standard request that architecture and information security and procurement, etc., all review. That's a really important process to start, and it's a great place to start and work with those other stakeholders to develop that process on how do our end user request software, and you're getting control of the software coming into your environment at the start of its life cycle. So one of the things you can use, again, the process guide does have a very base request software entitlement flow that you can look at to give you some ideas on things you should be thinking about, and really how it affects all of the other processes within software asset management. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the software catalog, right, what I've got on the screen here is just an example of a software catalog item, very, very basic software catalog item where an end user can go in and request Adobe Acrobat and order Adobe Acrobat. And one of the things that we mentioned earlier was making sure you had the procurement plugin in. So if you have the procurement plugin enabled within your instance, right, you're going to have a really great feature for you to be able to use, and that's called the source request. So your end user goes, they submit that catalog item for Adobe, right? It goes through the approval process. Their manager or whoever approves it says, yes, they can have this software. And now that my catalog item is tied to that software model, my software model's tied to my entitlements, I can now see, hey, do I have available entitlements for Adobe Acrobat? And in this screenshot, yeah, we have 12 available, so I don't need to purchase another one. So again, this is kind of having that view of what you own and what's being used, so that you can reuse what you already own instead of buying new. So it's about optimizing the cost. And again, that's what we talked about with those success goals, etc., being able to show the value of your SAM program by reusing software that's already been purchased and making sure the software that's been purchased is being used by the end users. If not, you're reclaiming it and getting that software entitlement back to allocate again to somebody else. So this is a great feature to use if you have the procurement plugin in place, and it's another reason, even if you have a separate procurement system, to use the procurement plugin within ServiceNow and tie things back to the catalog items so you can easily see what's available for you to use. And that takes us to the end of this presentation. I hope you found it very useful, and for sure, be sure to check out the rest of the videos on our SAS Rangers Software Asset Management YouTube playlist. Again, I've got a QR code here. If you want to scan it, it'll take you right to that playlist. Again, hope you found it valuable, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much.